Welcome to the Autoimmune Campfire.
Join us, coaches Helen and Nona, for honest, heartfelt conversations around living well with a chronic condition.
Come sit at our campfire. There's a chair waiting for you. Helen.
Nona. Welcome. Hi, it's so good to see you. How are you arriving today?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm arriving with some spring in the air. I know it's still a bit off, but this weekend, Eric and I took a ton of time to clean out all of the flower beds and plan for new plantings and cut things back. And oh, I love that. I love it so much. And
Ooh.
and I'm studying for the yoga therapy exam, which I'm going to take not this week, but the next week.
Oh my goodness, I have no worries about that because you are phenomenal at this work. But I love that spring cleanup, and there's something metaphorically about that, isn't there? Just taking away anything that doesn't serve anymore, making the ground fresh. I love that. I am loving, yeah, I'm loving a little bit of the spring temperatures. Yesterday, I walked with a friend who had lived in the same neighborhood as me for 20 plus years, but moved to Portland, Oregon, but was back for the weekend. And so we walked for 2 hours and just caught up, and all the neighbors came out and walked different laps. And so it sort of felt like this whole Pied Piper thing to welcome her back, which was really, really lovely. And so it was a lovely sort of social and sort of restful weekend, kind of just what I needed.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, I am so excited about our guest today. So it's a little bit out of, we had thought originally that most of these interviews would be with people who have chronic autoimmune conditions. And you invited your therapist to come and talk today about parts work, which I am so excited. So, do you want to introduce us to our guest?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Elizabeth Kush, or Biz, is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and she's a life coach for highly sensitive women. So I'm putting my hand up over here, and she's a business owner. She's also the host of Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. Elizabeth's worked in the mental health field for over 19 years, where she incorporates mind, body, and spirit into her work.
Fantastic. Welcome,
Yeah,
welcome,
welcome,
Biz.
Biz.
Hey, there you are. We want you in the middle.
Yes.
So
Wonderful. Welcome so much. I am so excited to have this conversation with you and to share parts work with our listeners because it has been so impactful for me. And I think also, well, I know also for Helen. So, for our listeners, it would be fantastic if you could talk a little bit about parts work and what it is and then of course what you love about it. I want to know what you love about it too, but we need to understand a little bit about parts work first. So I know I'm totally breaking the rules by asking you two questions. If you don't remember the second one after you talk about the first one, I will remind you. All right, yay.
sounds good. Yeah, so I first came upon parts work as I was kind of coming into my first training on trauma. So back when I initially got licensed, decided that it was really important to be trauma informed or trauma trained as a therapist. And within that training, the lead trainer opened the door to, one of the units was on working with our parts and different ways we could do that. And she referenced Richard Schwartz or Dick Schwartz. And I was like, oh, I need to know more about that. So that really started my journey. And the trainings are notoriously difficult to get into. So for internal family systems, which is what Dick Schwartz has I don't want to say created, but has brought forth into the world. They're very, very hard to get into. So I did my initial training in completed it in 2019, and just this year got into the level 2, which I'd been applying for over the last 4 years. So that just speaks to how many people are interested in this work. And so, I think what it helps us do is sort of look inward to reflect on and work with the parts of us that show up throughout our day, in our lifetime, when we're stressed, when we're just being here. Because, especially if you've experienced trauma, parts of us learn how to negotiate the world from sort of a traumatized place, especially if have experienced trauma in childhood. So you may have a very hypervigilant part that's always looking for danger, or you might have a people pleaser part that learned how to sort of get along by just doing what everybody else wanted, right? And so the work of parts work is really getting to know the part's intentions, because all parts truly have good intentions, even if it's sometimes hard for us to understand what they are. And so getting to know their intentions, getting to know why they do what they do. So, there can be parts of us that we don't like. For instance, maybe an overeating part, or maybe you might have a part that turns to drugs or alcohol to help you cope. Like, those parts can be very polarizing in our systems, because there'll be other parts that hate those parts. And that can lead to a lot of inner turmoil, disruption of our sort of equilibrium, but also, understanding, especially with an autoimmune condition, right? Inflammation is so key to managing just all of our bodies, whether you have autoimmune or not, right? And so sometimes the parts activation can also trigger internal disruption, right? So our digestive system may get out of whack, or it may create some additional stress internally that then triggers inflammation, which then can make us feel worse. So, like, the better we understand our parts and can relate to them with kindness and compassion and caring, the more balanced we feel, and the more what internal family systems calls self energy. That self energy can be what sort of leads our system. It's not like we're in it all the time, but it helps us better feel like ourselves, I guess.
So I just want to have you back up even one more step, because I think there are probably people who are like, parts? What the hell does that mean? Because that can sound a little crazy. So I would love for you to just take a moment to kind of explain the theory behind what parts means.
A part of me that thinks, like, I don't want to get too technical here, but
Sure. Yeah.
so for instance, throughout your day, you're going about your business, something disrupts it, right? You make a mistake, you say something unkind to somebody, and that voice you hear, that critical voice, says, what the fuck are you doing? Right? What on earth are you doing, you stupid piece of whatever, right? Just this highly critical voice in your head that is just pointing out all the ways you mess things up, right? To me, so that's a part of you, right? That's not really truly who you are. It is a part of you that has learned to use criticism to keep you from making mistakes again. So it may sound for some people, like, you talk about your inner child, right? It's as if there's all these internal you have a system of parts, basically. We all do. So, and they show up at different times. So I have a really good manager part that likes to make sure I'm on time and that I'm showing up for the things that I need to do, well prepared. I have a very well-known people-pleasing part that wants to make sure everybody else's needs are being taken care of, and kind of leaves my needs to the last, for the last minute. So it's just a way of relating to ourselves, and it doesn't necessarily mean we're broken, because really we all have these different parts of us that help us navigate the world. Is that helpful?
Right. So what I hear you say is that oftentimes when we feel like I am this or I suck because I did that, like whenever we're over identifying with a certain narrative or a certain action or a certain set of behaviors, that we can actually think of those as being parts in our system, and that by using this language of parts, we can disidentify from them a little bit and maybe get some purchase on healing and changing things up.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And that disidentifying, I think, is really important. It's like the way we better understand our parts, objectives, or intentions is to have a little space there, right? So we can listen and better understand, what they need. And I know it sounds kind of funny as if we're talking about, but I do kind of imagine it in my own system as like I am relating to these, whether it's younger parts or parts that have learned how to navigate the adult world. It just makes me feel more compassionate towards them as if, they are like little people inside me. Not necessarily everybody has that same, it could just be energies that you feel, right? If you start to feel rageful or incredibly hurt, like there's probably a part of you that's being touched by something that is happening in your environment.
I like to think about it sometimes as, we're all on a bus together and who do you want to have the wheel? Because I've often found that thing where if I get really hooked and hijacked, there's there's this sense of, oh, I don't feel like myself right now. And so maybe if the perfectionist has the wheel, or it's sort of that space is where I notice that happening is where the space where I can go, okay, so I'm noticing this and I'm noticing this. So it's not me. It's like, what's the conversation I want to internally have to be able to actually shape my life the way I want versus having a part kind of take it from a reactionary perspective or a trauma based perspective.
I would say that they're all you, right? I mean, all your parts are you, right? And sometimes we need those parts that take over, right? I mean, if we are in an unsafe environment, we want that protective part that's hypervigilant and really looking for safety and, questioning, is this person safe or is this environment safe? We want them to be able to navigate successfully, right? And get the heck out of there if we need to. But oftentimes, the parts sort of perspective on the world, especially when we've had trauma, they're operating from a place of like, that's what's happening now, the trauma that happened in the past, right? That they're reacting from that space. So a wounded inner child or an extreme protective part is behaving as if I'm still stuck in that time when
Yeah,
maybe I'm
yeah.
not.
It's so powerful. And I love what you said about getting more familiar with your parts and having these compassionate conversations helps with inflammation. And we know that inflammation is, happening a lot in autoimmune conditions. But in your experience, how do you think parts contributes to managing or thriving with an autoimmune condition? I mean, I heard inflammation, but I'm like, what else?
Well, I know for myself, just I shared with you before we started that I am just coming off an outpatient patient surgery, but that kind of knocked me down for a week and a half, the recovery. I had parts, so I don't have I mean, I have a chronic health condition, but I don't have an autoimmune condition. So I'm familiar with what it's like when things flare up and I'm not my best. So I have parts that criticize me taking too long, like I should be feeling better. Or I have parts that say like, "You deserve to rest. Get off your feet, go lay down." But then I'm resting and I'm feeling guilty. There's parts of me that are showing up feeling guilty that I'm not doing enough, not contributing enough. And so oftentimes like those extremely polarized parts, like you should rest. No, you should be doing more, then creates enough internal distress that it can, sort of knock us back again into the distress, the physical distress of the condition, right?
Yes. Oh, for sure. And I think the uncertainty, there's parts that want to lock it down and get
Mhm.
ourselves on the path that we thought we were on. I mean, have a really hard time with the "Hmm, everything you plan to do today, not so much."
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Even if it's not like productive, quote unquote, plans, even if it's like, oh, I wanted to go away this weekend and have fun, right? And like, guess what? No, you're not. You're going to stay home. But I think our parts can sometimes aggravate, but our parts can help too, right? I mean, the part that really truly wants you to rest and take care of yourself, the parts that know what you need, to do that, they're really I mean, they're all trying to help, but then maybe sometimes the help doesn't always sound like help, right?
For sure. So what about if we make it a little practical and talk about what this looks like, the value of this in real life and how we talk about parts in our therapy. I have a real pleasing sweetheart who wants everybody to be happy. And, as you mentioned in our intro, that can sort of often mean you're at the bottom of the list. I think my hypervigilance looks like perfecting. So, that sort of
Mhm.
constantly driven over functioning. A lot of very fearful parts that really get amped up in autoimmune because I think there are a lot of things that can be scary in these conditions. So, I mean, they're like, and then there are, we've identified parts from previous work doing EMDR with a different therapist was these amazing parts that are sort of like this goddess part who comes in and is like, oh, sweetheart, you've got this, sort of almost like this spiritual part. And then my crone part who comes in and is just so loving and also holds me accountable. Like, I want you to be as when you grow older, I want you to I want you to think about me now so that you can give me the best life. So it's almost like it's a loving future old version of myself, but with accountability, which I think is super helpful. So what would you observe about parts and what you're noticing about how it is when we work together or what you think are the benefits?
Well, I think you've described some of them. Like one of the sessions we worked on, and I'm not going to go into detail about it, but at the end of it, you were like, oh, I hear you relating to this part with lots of compassion and care and kindness, where I'm kind of saying, I want you to go away. I want to get rid of you. I want you to just be quiet and shut up.
Yeah.
And so this relates back to something you asked. The second question you asked, Nona, was that the reason I love it is because it helps us build this beautiful, kind, compassionate relationship with ourselves, which a lot of us don't have, right? That we weren't even taught that was possible.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question
Yeah.
about you've brought up trauma and how this is so helpful when people have experienced trauma. And I wonder, either from your observation or from research, and I'm not sure if there is research supporting this, that people who have, do you know if people have experienced trauma have more parts and tend to have autoimmune conditions? I mean, I'm assuming because of the research around ACEs, and that's adverse childhood
Yes.
events, and how that adds to the possibility of people having chronic conditions as they get older. But do you find that that is true of people who have autoimmune conditions, that many of them have experienced adverse childhood events and or trauma? I know that's a yes or no question, which is a terrible interview question. So maybe you'll just expand on it a little bit.
Yes, yes. I would say yes, absolutely. Usually There is some, and I think what can be confusing, is that when we think of trauma, we think of either a singular event or something very clear and explicit, right? Where often, at least for the clients that I work with, that the trauma is more often like attachment wounds, right? So our emotional needs were not being met as a child. And so when that's happening, there are ruptures in our system, right? If our primary caregiver isn't meeting our emotional needs, we learn how to navigate the world from that perspective, but we also aren't given the opportunities, the tools, the unconditional love to build that sense of self from the beginning, right? So maybe if as a child your parent was sort of emotionally absent, either you could become an extreme people pleaser because that brings the attention toward you, even if it's maybe not the attention that you need. Or you could have a part that learns to take care of itself, become extremely self-reliant because nobody's going to give you what you need. You better figure it out yourself, right? So I would say that parts get formed around the traumas, and they can often be more active, more reactive, maybe a little more extreme than if you were raised in a loving, supportive home where maybe a trauma happened, but then you got the love and attention and the repair that you needed to move through that, if that makes sense. I mean, I can speak for myself. I experienced a very early childhood trauma that my parents knew about, but didn't have the resources or understanding of like what might need to happen to help me heal from that. So basically, like, oh, it happened. Yeah, we knew it happened. We're not going to do anything about it. So you're going to have to basically, my parts are like, all right, I just have to figure out how to navigate the world myself. And maybe the world's not a very safe place. And maybe I really have to be super careful about who I'm in relationship with.
And do you find that people who you work with who have autoimmune conditions often have experienced this kind of emotional trauma?
I would say yes. Yes.
I think that's a really important thing for listeners to really, I mean, that can be a hard pill to swallow, but it's also, I think, in many ways liberating to recognize that if you engage with parts work, you have an opportunity to potentially repair and reparent with those parts of you that are still living as if they're in that trauma situation. That's what I heard you say, but I really think that can be so powerful for people to have a way to move forward with that kind of healing.
Yeah. And I don't ever want anyone to think that, like, oh, if I haven't done this inner work, then like this autoimmune disease is my fault. Like, I haven't done the things I need to fix it, right? Because that is just not the case. But can we work to help heal some of the past trauma and build a more compassionate relationship when the autoimmune flares up or when you are feeling whatever you're feeling about where you are in the moment?
I mean, I think one of the things I think is really powerful is about your work is you have that highly sensitive person frame too, which I think, if you're a highly sensitive person, which what 50 to 20% of the population are, and they have not gone away, right? They have stayed through time, and this is from Elaine Aron's work, then you're taking in more stimuli and processing more stimuli. So then it's almost like I just got this little hit while you were talking about it's more for the parts to work with. Like there's more coming in and there's more that they're processing you're trying to work with. And so I think there's a beautiful marriage in those two things of, oh, I see that. And there's also all of that work that Gabor Mate talks about, linking trauma with autoimmune disease. So there are indicators out there. I don't know how evidence based it is, but then it's an invitation. Well, what might help resolve this? Or what would this look like? And I certainly feel when I have worked with you, I walk away, I'm like, oh, it's just like a little, ooh, and just loving on my parts, even those ones who I come in going, I can't believe. I just want to acknowledge the difference that you make in the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I think for women, well, women and men who are highly sensitive, it can add an additional layer to, yeah, their healing and their experience because, yes, we're taking in the environmental stimuli, but we're also highly sensitive to the emotions of the people around us. And so if we're whatever we're experiencing is we're feeling that others are feeling we're too much, we're feeling too much, we're saying too much, we're too emotional. Once we start shutting those emotions down, that also then just traps all that energy within, which can cause inflammation and digestive issues and anxiety and depression and all of the, yeah, struggles we can have as adults or teenagers or, yeah, young kids.
I have a question about that. I was just when Helen was talking about highly sensitive people, and you were just talking about that. I thought to myself, well, I wonder if actually highly sensitive. I don't know how to say this, so it doesn't sound weird. How high sensitivity, if that is actually a part that is born of a family situation where you have to have your antennas up and be taking in more because it's not safe. Like, I don't know. I just thought when Helen was talking, I was like, I have definitely I've thought of myself as being highly sensitive. And as I've done more parts work and felt safer in my body and done somatic work, I'm not as sensitive anymore. Like, I don't have as much like reactivity and like, oh my God, I have to pay attention to everything that's going on to make sure everything's going to be okay. Like, so I'm curious about your take on that. Like, because we're talking about different things as being parts, but that isn't something that you've kind of presented as a part. You've presented it as more like an I thing, right?
Well, high sensitivity is a biological trait, right? There are 15 to 20% or 15 to 30% of the world, animals included, have this trait of high sensitivity. And so there's that, right? And it just means that we do take in all environmental stimuli in a different way than the average person. So it can be sound, it can be smells, it can be what we're tasting, it can be how things feel, like, clothing on your body or but it also can be emotional, right? Like we are very good at reading the energy of others. So it's all that energy that's out there in the world. We absorb it, I don't know what percentage more than the average person. And for each person, it's different, even within the high sensitivity grouping, right? I tend to be very sensitive to sound and smells. But I think what you were describing, Nona, is more like a hypervigilant part, right? So a part that is really assessing. And yes, it is highly attuned to what's happening out there, but it's from a danger perspective, like, right? How do I keep myself safe? Where high sensitivity is more, we are just taking in all the energetic stuff that's happening in the world. We just absorb it more, if that makes sense. So we can easily get overwhelmed. We can, does that sound right, Helen? I mean, am I
Oh,
describing that?
yeah, yeah. I mean, even just temperature changes can make me feel really, really uncomfortable when everybody else is fine, or I can feel a draft across a room, or all sorts of things that feel very physical. And I guess really right from the get-go, I heard messages as a young child that my sisters did not get of you're just so sensitive. So I don't know, whereas we had the same sort of we had the same upbringing. So it's interesting. I think of it more of a holistic feel to it. But once I learned about highly sensitive, it really made a big difference to me because I felt, oh, I'm normal. like this is normal for me. It really, because I'd always been told so sensitive, like it's like,
A
like a
bad
bad
thing.
thing. And,
Yes, yes,
it
yes.
has many gifts. And these people over time have not been disappeared. They might not be the warriors, but they might be more of the sages. Do you know what I mean? And so there's value to this. And it's also about managing your energy. So I think there's an interplay with parts, but I agree with Biz. I don't know, even if I did all of the parts work, whether I'd be able to turn down those things where it's like, there's a draft from just that corner over there. Like, I just want to, like, I don't know if that would change that.
Yeah, but I do think as we learn to understand our sensitivities, we learn how to take care of ourselves, so they may not feel as present, right? Like, I know going to a crowded party with people that I don't know very well makes me incredibly anxious. I already feel it ahead of time because I know when I'm there, I'm just gonna be absorbing the noise, the new people, the idea of having conversations with people I don't know. Like, it just feels like there's gonna be so much coming at me, so much environmental stimuli coming at me that I have to kind of prepare my parts for that. And I would say there are parts that react to our sensitivities, right? Like, "Oh, you are just being too much. You should just get over this. You should just put yourself out there and not worry about it," right? Like, I have parts that can be very, very critical of my own sensitivities.
Gosh, yes, I have some of those too. Um, so what would you want our listeners to take away from our conversation today, Biz, about parts work?
I would say, like, if it sounds interesting to you, there's lots of great, resources out there now around parts work that you can research and look into. There's a whole bunch of great books that have been put out. I think the bottom line for me is that really it's about building a kind, compassionate relationship with yourself. Like, that is the key, and that when we can do that, more of our self energy shines through, and that attracts people in our world who also are coming from that place too, which is really beautiful.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Biz. So, Nona, what are you taking away from our conversation today?
I really appreciated the whole conversation around sensitivity versus parts that might be hypervigilant, and just the like recognizing those things, especially when you have ACEs or you've experienced some kind of emotional trauma, and that pulling those things apart is important and can help you heal. And it's about reparenting and it's about loving all of your parts, right? Whether you find that you remain sensitive or like me, I am definitely less sensitive. But when you were just talking, Biz, I was thinking, oh, yeah, I've just like given all those parts that used to be like, well, you should do this, that made me go into situations where I was perhaps uncomfortable or didn't take care of me as well. Like, I've really like done a lot of work with those parts. So that may be why I don't feel as sensitive anymore, because I don't put myself in situations, where my inner critic is like, well, you should do more than that. So like I am buoyed by parts work again and again. I love it, and I love sharing this with our listeners because it is such a joyous process, right? Like, and I hear your pleasure in it, right? And the potency of it. And so that's what I'm going to be taking away.
Beautiful. I mean, I think the main takeaway for me is really what Biz said, which is that the bringing in of more kindness and compassion. And I think we've talked about this, especially in season one, which is this thing in our culture of the autoimmune warrior and fighting disease and lost their battle with, a lot of these sort of things. And really, every gain I've made has been grounded in kindness and compassion. And I mean, I'm almost getting tears as I say that because it's countercultural in some ways. And I think that's the big thing. And I think that, and I'm not understating the privilege of being able to work with Biz and the piece where the facilitated conversation with the parts is so, because I can do it on my own. I can be like, oh, hello, Petunia. That's my pleasing part. Hello, Petunia. What do you need? Right? I can have that conversation. But Biz is able to sort of see through and see, I think there's two parts there. What would that look like? What are you hearing? What is the why? What is the, and so it's almost like you can step out of it and trust somebody else to facilitate the conversations while bringing this whole environment of kindness and compassion, so that at the end of the day, I feel like it's a further progress. I think you can get a lot with self-study, but I think there's something about that energy that your practitioner brings to it as well.
And I agree. I mean, just for my own personal work, I agree 100%. Yeah, I've done a lot of the studying, I've read the books, I've been to the trainings, and the work I have an IFS therapist myself, and the work that I've done with that therapist has been more than I think I could have done myself alone.
So I think that's what I'm taking away is the value of the work that we're doing. And this is something that one of the things that I think for me is really important to invest in it, because I have just, I have a PhD in GI health, but also catastrophizing. I can go there in a split second. And this helps give me that space and the structure around when I go down a loop. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Biz, I'm wondering, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
I am a therapist, so I'm licensed in Maryland and Delaware to see clients that reside in either of those states, and you can find me there at progressioncounseling.com. But I'm also a life guide for highly sensitive women, and you can find that at elizabethcush.com. And Cush is spelled with a C, not a K. AI likes to transcribe that inaccurately, but that's okay. But yes, you can find me there. And also on my podcast, Awaken Your Wise Woman.
Which is wonderful too.
Fantastic.
Oh, Biz, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Absolutely love your wisdom and your presence, and it's been such a gift to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you guys both for holding this space. It felt really, really nurturing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, Biz. Did you enjoy this campfire conversation? Please rate our podcast wherever you're listening to light the way for others to find the Autoimmune Campfire. The information provided on the Autoimmune Campfire is for educational or informational purposes only. It is not intended nor implied as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always, always consult your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you might have regarding a medical condition or treatment plan. The Autoimmune Campfire does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on this site or podcast. Recording and editing wizardry by Make Your Day Richer. Thanks for joining Helen and I around the campfire.